the house on Corpus Hill. Thomas Westford had always dreamed of building a home for his family. A place where laughter would echo through the halls, where his children would grow up safe and sound, and where he and his wife, Emily, could grow old together. So when he found the perfect piece of land, just a few miles outside the bustling town of Greymorn, he seized the opportunity. The land, perched on a hill overlooking a dense forest, was vast and beautiful. Rolling fields of wildflowers stretched toward the tree line, and from the crest of the hill, one could see for miles. The real estate agent had told him it was an incredible deal, over 100 acres for a fraction of what one might expect. The locals called it Corpus Hill, a strange name with origins no one could quite explain. Still, the name didn't deter Thomas. He was no superstitious man, and his excitement about the project overpowered any latent concerns about the history of the land. Construction began in the spring. Thomas worked alongside a small team of builders, pouring his heart and soul into every brick and beam. Emily was hesitant at first. There was something about the land that made her uneasy, but she trusted her husband's vision and put her doubts aside for the sake of their future. Their young son, Ethan, often accompanied Thomas to the site, playing in the fields while his father worked. From the start, strange things began to happen. At first, it was small and easy to dismiss, tools disappearing only to reappear in odd places, the faint sound of footsteps when no one else was around, and an eerie chill that would sweep through the air, even on the warmest of days. Thomas brushed it off, attributing it to the stress of the project and the natural noises of the countryside. But as the house neared completion, the oddities grew more unsettling. One night, as Thomas was working late on the framework, he heard something strange, whispers, like the murmur of a distant conversation. He paused, listening intently, but there was no one else around. His workers had gone home hours earlier. He stood, hammer in hand, scanning the dark woods that bordered the property. The whispers continued, growing louder and more distinct, but the words were unintelligible, like an ancient language he couldn't understand. The air felt heavy, oppressive. He shook his head and returned to his work, trying to ignore the prickling sensation creeping up his spine. When he told Emily about it, she looked troubled. "Maybe you're overworking yourself," she suggested gently. "It's probably nothing." But it didn't feel like nothing. As the days passed, Ethan began talking about a new friend he had made while playing near the edge of the woods. He's tall, with a big beard, Ethan explained one evening at dinner. And he wears old clothes, like from a storybook. Thomas and Emily exchanged glances. "Is he one of the workers?" Emily asked, trying to mask her concern. "No," Ethan said, frowning. "He doesn't come up to the house. He just watches me from the trees." Thomas felt a chill run down his spine but didn't want to alarm his son. "Maybe it's just your imagination, buddy." Ethan shrugged, unfazed. "Maybe." The house was finished by the beginning of autumn, a beautiful two-story home with wide windows that overlooked the hills and forest below. On the day they moved in, the air was crisp, and the trees were starting to turn shades of gold and red. Despite the unsettling occurrences, Thomas couldn't help but feel proud of what he had built. This was their home now, and whatever strange happenings had occurred during construction could be forgotten. Or so he thought. The first few nights passed without incident. Emily decorated the rooms with warmth and care, while Ethan explored every nook and cranny of his new home. But on the fourth night, something woke Thomas from a deep sleep. It was a sound, soft at first, then louder, the distinct creaking of footsteps moving up the stairs. He lay still, listening, his heart pounding. The sound stopped just outside their bedroom door. Emily stirred beside him, her eyes wide with fear. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Thomas nodded, rising from the bed. He grabbed the baseball bat he kept by the door and slowly opened it, stepping into the dark hallway. The house was silent. He moved cautiously, checking each room, but found nothing. No sign of an intruder. Yet the sense of being watched was overwhelming. He could feel eyes on him, hidden somewhere in the darkness. The following morning, Emily suggested they call a priest. "Just to bless the house," she said, trying to sound nonchalant, though her voice trembled slightly. Thomas reluctantly agreed. He wasn't religious, but if it made her feel better, then it was worth it. The local priest came that afternoon, an older man with kind eyes. He walked through the house, murmuring prayers, sprinkling holy water in each room. When he finished, he turned to Thomas, his face serious. "This place feels heavy," he said quietly. "There is a presence here, something old and restless. I suggest you be careful." Thomas didn't like the priest's tone, but he thanked him and saw him out. That night, Ethan woke screaming. Thomas and Emily rushed to his room, finding their son sobbing and pointing toward the window. "He was here," Ethan cried, shaking. "The man from the woods. He was standing by my bed, staring at me." Emily wrapped her arms around Ethan, trying to calm him, but her own fear was evident in her wide eyes. Thomas checked the window, but it was locked from the inside. Still, the hair on the back of his neck stood on end. The next morning, Thomas decided to investigate the land more thoroughly. He had heard whispers from the locals about Corpus Hill, about how the Norse settlers who had arrived centuries ago had used the area for burial mounds. But he had never paid it much mind, until now. He drove to the Greymorn Historical Society, where an elderly librarian helped him comb through old maps and documents. What he found chilled him to the bone. The hill their house was built on had once been the site of an ancient Norse burial ground, long forgotten and overgrown. The name Corpus Hill had come from the early settlers, who believed that the land was sacred, a resting place for their dead. Ravens, they said, would gather there, carrying the souls of the fallen to the afterlife. But there were darker tales too, whispers of restless spirits and curses placed on those who disturbed the graves. Thomas returned home, his heart heavy with dread. He hadn't just built a house for his family. He had built it on a sacred, and perhaps cursed, site. As the weeks passed, the hauntings intensified. At night, Thomas would hear the sound of heavy boots stomping through the halls, the creaking of wood as though someone, or something, was walking the perimeter of the house. Emily would wake to the sound of whispered prayers in a language she didn't understand. Ethan refused to sleep in his room, terrified that the bearded man would return. The breaking point came one night when they all woke to the sound of violent banging from the basement. Thomas rushed downstairs, bat in hand, only to find the heavy wooden door splintered, as though something had tried to force its way out from below. The air was thick with the smell of earth and decay, and as he stepped into the room, he saw it, bones, half buried in the dirt floor. Norse runes, etched into the walls, glowed faintly in the dim light. They left the house that night, fleeing to the safety of a nearby hotel. Thomas called in a specialist, someone who dealt with paranormal activity. The man arrived the next morning, a quiet and serious individual who didn't offer false comfort. He walked the property, examining the house and the land. After hours of silent study, he returned with a grim expression. "Your home was built on a burial site," he confirmed. "A powerful one. The spirits here are ancient, and they are angry. They were disturbed when you built your home, and now they want what's theirs." Thomas felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "What can we do?" The man shook his head slowly. "There's little that can be done. The land is cursed, and the spirits will not rest until it is left alone. You must leave, and never return." Devastated, Thomas and his family packed what they could and moved away, leaving their dream home behind. The house still stands on Corpus Hill, abandoned and silent, a monument to the past and a warning to those who would disturb the dead. The locals say that on cold, dark nights, you can still see the flicker of lights in the windows and hear the faint whispers of ancient voices carried on the wind. And sometimes, just sometimes, a raven will perch on the roof, watching, waiting, guarding the resting place of the forgotten Norse warriors below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to support the channel. See you next time.